Welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Man, oh man, oh man. At the time of this recording, we just finished a profiler training live event, which was incredible. I always get so much energy from being in a group of people in our profiler training community that are interested in personality types, personal growth, and the intersection of those things. I mean, the conversations are incredible. It gives me so much energy. I'm almost high, feeling high for weeks afterward. And I can use that energy to just create, get new ideas, inspiration. I feel better. It's a fantastic feeling. I wish I could bottle up and take with me everywhere.
We call it the love fugue.
Yeah, it's so good.
Like you end up sort of wandering off with this fugue, but it's a good one because it's based on the energy of other people, positive, good, high vibration energy. And the events, we probably do this every time we come back from an event. We probably are like, we just came back for an event. It was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, probably any event feels that way, but just to have people into type geeking out for 5 days straight feels so wonderful to me.
Yeah.
Just the energy it's created, and watching the INTJs in the group stay up till 2:00 in the morning talking in the lobby of the hotel we're having the event is always weirdly enough, the NPs all go to bed because I got up tomorrow. You'd think it was the opposite, but then these INTJs are up till all hours of the night talking with each other. It's just I love it.
This spawned a conversation though about what is it about the events, the profiler training events that are so powerful. And that spawned a conversation about the difference between personality typing and the profiling experience itself. And I think that, there is something here about, just the energy of being around people who are into the same stuff that you're into and the kind of conversations that you can have. And of course, most people who come to these events are podcast listeners. That's what they started out with. And the podcast is about more than personality types. It's also about personal growth and development. So you get a group of people who are, who can hang with us while we're talking about growth stuff. You can always tell people are just into type and not into growth because they'll leave some salty feedback about how we're talking about too much woo-woo stuff. But the people who are, podcast listeners who end up wanting to go to the next level, then they go to these events and they're surrounded by people who are, like you said, interested in the intersection between type and growth. But I think the profiling system itself, the methodology, is a piece of it. And you, the listener, will have to bear with me for a moment because I'm going to kind of fold in a little bit about why I think the methodology itself lends itself to having the kinds of experiences we do when we go to these events. But it sparked a conversation about the difference between profiling and type or typing people. And I think the methodology has its roots in making sure that you are serving another person, that you're looking at it through the lens of growth. And so doing profiling sessions themselves actually end up being growth tools for the individual. So what we want to do in this podcast is we want to talk about what we mean when we say the difference between personality typing and profiling. And then we want to give you some parts of this methodology. We teach it on a profiler training course, but even if you never come to a profiler training course yourself, you're just not in a position to, maybe you're in a part of the world that, you can't access one, or maybe it's just not the right time for you. We want to give you pieces of this methodology if you want to develop your own strategies and see if it works for you. If you also find the same rewards that we do as we go through the profiler training course. Before we talk about the difference between typing and profiling, though, let's talk about what the profiling methodology entails. The first thing you have to know about a profiling session is that there's actually 4 different components to profiling. And again, even if you never come to profiler training, you might want to maybe pick up some of these strategies when you're trying to figure out the type, figure out the personality type of maybe people in your family or friends in order to get some of the benefits that we hinted at before. So the 4 pieces of a profiling session is what we call rapport building. The second one is the interview. The third component is something we call verification. And the fourth component is explanation. The first piece, which is rapport building, is effectively the ability to have the other person feel safe enough to start answering questions that might lead to an intimate space inside of themselves. Like everybody has a social mask and everybody has a radically authentic part of who they are. And what they choose to show an individual changes depending upon how safe they feel, how insecure they might feel in the moment, who this person is and what relationship they have to the individual, and then just maybe the relationship that they have with themselves. And a really good profiling session, which is a conversation that happens over the course of time. Like oftentimes profiling sessions, even with really seasoned profilers, last at least an hour long. A conversation with another person that creates or co-creates an experience with them requires a feeling of safety. So the first thing that one must do if they're involved or creating this experience with another person is to develop rapport. And there's actually two different kinds of rapport that we talk about. The first one's called energetic rapport, and the second one is data rapport. Energetic rapport is vibing with another person. It's feeling like the energetic back and forth that you have when you just like somebody and you just want to be in their energy field. Feelers are usually better at this than thinkers are because it's that interaction. It's like the subcommunication that happens between two people. And when you're doing that, it almost doesn't matter what the content or the information is. Like this is a lot of what, when people talk about, I hate, shallow conversations, or I hate gossip, or I hate, what's the word? The thing
small talk.
Small talk. Thank you. I hate small talk. And usually all small talk is a way for two people to actually get into energetic rapport. It's a way for two people to start vibing with each other. And then if they like the vibe, if they can feel each other out and like that energetic rapport vibe, then they can add data rapport on top of it. Data rapport is where most thinkers tend to run to. And data rapport is the ability to sync up two different minds to ensure that information is passing undisturbed between two people. So you're actually linking up with, what does this person know? What do they not know? What are the pictures going on in their minds when I'm using certain words? Is it the same thing that I'm intending? Are they inferring what I'm implying? Right? It's making sure that there's a two-way street of information that isn't getting disrupted with misunderstandings or with logistics or whatever. And so a really good profiling session actually focuses on both of these components, and it learns to juggle between the two. You keep a good energetic rapport to make the person feel safe in your presence and they like you and they want to share information with you. And then you also maintain data rapport, which is ensuring that the conversation is got a good flow of information back and forth. And because each of us trends toward being better at one over the other, then my recommendation is to figure out which one you're better at and then work on the other. And in a good profiling session, you've got both represented. And of course, it's also knowing when maybe you're vibing too much and you haven't remembered what the person said. And in that case, you might have to actually withhold a little bit of rapport. You might have to break it in order to get back into data rapport. And so there's a little bit of a juggling act that happens there. Once you've established good rapport, then you go into the second part of a profiling session, which is the interview. And this is what most people would think of as typing, right? Or active typing when you're talking to another person. But a really good interview is an art. You probably, if you've listened to podcasts or if you've watched interviews on TV, you know when somebody's a bad or a poor interviewer. They talk over the other person. They interrupt them. They don't let the person give a full, complete answer to a question before they sideline them into another direction. Like, in order to do a really good interview, you have to be able to hold space for that person and all of the content that they're giving you. And of course, in an interview for profiling, you're talking about that person, and they should be engaged and they should be in flow while they're talking about themselves, because most people do get in flow while they're talking about themselves, as long as, of course, you've established rapport and they feel comfortable and confident in that space. But a good interview does what we call a side door method, which is you can't directly ask somebody to describe their cognitive functions. They just won't know. They're like a fish in water. And it's their entire experience, so they can't possibly chunk it down and model what they're doing for you, because otherwise they would have invented a typology system themselves. So you have to ask questions that get to the answers through a side door. And when you're going through that series of questions, you always have to dig deeper for why. What's happening underneath? people of all different personality types might say that one of their favorite activities is gardening. It's not that gardening necessarily matches up directly with any specific cognitive function. It can match up with a lot of different functions, but each function comes at it in a different way. And so then you always have to ask why. What is it about gardening? What do you love? Is it that you love to put your hands in the dirt and feel it, and feel it like a relationship with the earth? Or is it that you just really like to have a great garden that everybody can see as they're approaching your home? Or is it something completely different? And so a good interview always digs deeper, asks why, gets the etymology of what's going on for the individual, and allows them space to have complete answers. And since you're asking questions that they may never have thought of before, it also means giving them plenty of time and space to think through it, not getting anxious when a person is collecting their thoughts and there might be silence for a while and thinking, oh God, I have to fill the silence. It's being patient, it's focusing on them, it's letting them give you complete thoughts and really gather what's going on for them as they're studying themselves through your eyes, maybe for the first time in a completely different way. So a good interview not only gives solid questions and a foundation of good questions, it also helps build the art of interviewing in and of itself. And so a good profiling session will come with a really good interview. The third component to a profiling session is something we call verification. And this is actually what is often missing from most other methodologies for typing. Verification is about a 5-minute process where after the interview, if you feel confident as the profiler that you've come to what could be their best fit type, this is where you get their immediate real world feedback on whether or not the place that you landed is resonating with them. So if you've done an interview and you're fairly certain you're talking to an ESTJ, you would walk through the 4 dichotomies of extroversion, introversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and judging and perceiving, and have a really good solid script, an explanation for each of these, and then check in with them to ensure that each one of those things resonates. If it doesn't resonate, why doesn't it resonate? Is it because you didn't describe it very well? Is it because how you see introversion, extroversion, say, is not how they're seeing it? Or is it because they legitimately don't resonate with your type conclusion? If that happens, then the responsibility of the person doing the profiling session is to go back into interview and figure out where you went wrong. If the person, you think you're talking to an ESTJ, you describe extroversion, they are not resonating with it. Well, it could be that because they're using extroverted thinking or effectiveness as their dominant or driver function, it's more about projects and getting things done and making things happen. And they have a conflation of extroversion with being social. And making sure that your explanation of each of these dichotomies is broad enough to resonate with all of the different styles of, say, extroverted functions or introverted functions so that they can really get a clear idea of it. So having strong scripts, being able to call back to some of the answers that they gave during the interview illustratively for why you think that they're this direction, and really being open to being wrong, not fighting for your choices or the conclusions you came to, but really listening to their feedback and determining whether or not, this person is not resonating with this. I need to go figure out where I took the wrong path.
What is so beautiful about profiling is that the feedback mechanism of constant calibration is built into the system, the methodology itself. So each profiling session has this feedback loop, meaning you're able to continually calibrate as you go through. Like ongoing, you're able to calibrate over and over and over again, refining your own process.
Yeah, and I think, I'll get to it in just a moment, but the benefits of profiling and being around other people who are learning it, that constant calibration is a piece of why it's so powerful. So the fourth portion, you get through verification, they're resonating with all of your explanations around the dichotomies, they're super gung-ho, and now you get to the explanation portion of the profiling session. And this is where you give them a souvenir to go home with of the trip the two of you just took together. The souvenir should be a more powerful understanding of how they operate. Something about themselves that makes them feel understood, makes them feel like they are, not complete and total weirdos. like there's something about them that is, fits into a subset of people that engage and interact with the world in this way, which should also be quite comforting. Even the most iconoclastic person will oftentimes feel very just a sense of community or a sense of belongingness when they go through a really solid explanation. So our recommendation is to have a methodology for doing this, because you can do explanations in a variety of ways. Sometimes when people explain type, they go through stereotypes, or they go through fictional characters. They try to explain the dichotomies, or maybe they try to explain cognitive functions. And sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't with the other person. One of the challenges with fictional characters is that there are many varieties of each personality type, and the personality type of a fictional character may be the same Myers-Briggs type, but a different style of them. And so they might not really resonate with that person specifically. And the more you go through profiling, the more you understand that there is a lot of nuance between types, or within the same type, rather. It really forces you to expand your territory and expand your definitions of what each of these personality types looks like. And so when you go through profiling, you're actually really focused more on the wiring of their mind than whether or not they match a stereotype inside your mind. And so a good explanation won't just fall back on archetypes or stereotypes. It will create a method for explaining cognitive functions so that the person can take that wisdom away. And sometimes that can be tough, because if you go through an interview process for like the last hour, they might be really tired. Like they might be exhausted from the process. And that makes sense, because they've had to do a lot of thought labor around understanding who they are, and and maybe answering questions that they've never answered before. And so you want to make it pithy. You want to make it short enough so that you're not data dumping them, that they're not going away with like too much information for their mental bandwidth to hold, but also to make it resonant and actionable so that they can implement it immediately in their life. And if you make it actionable so that they understand it and resonate immediately, that gives them an opportunity to want to open up the door later and go pursue an understanding of their type even more. So you can see how profiling is very different than typing. Typing can be done at a distance. It's what we do with characters on, in movies and TV shows. It's, when you first get into type, usually you're doing lots of typing because you're just trying to understand the system. Like it's a method or an on-ramp into understanding all of these really kind of complex concepts. And so people who get super into personality typologies almost immediately, and this is like 100% of people who get into it, almost immediately start typing everybody. They type the people in their families, their friends, their animals, their pets, like inanimate objects. Yeah. Everybody goes crazy in typing.
That crazy in typing, you're absolutely right. It was like year 3 or 4, I think, of the podcast, where you and I, Antonia, had been doing this, over half a decade. We had created a podcast with hundreds of episodes, or over 100 episodes or something. We had products and programs were talking about this, and we have these YouTube videos out there talking about personality types. I would think that it looks like we know what we're doing, but people are even typing us. They would come under these videos and say, "You're not this type, you're this other type," and they would like project types onto us. And I remember kind of getting offended by that. I'm like, who the heck gives you the right, at the time. Now I have a different perspective of it, which I'll talk about. But I was like, you don't know me, like, a little my FI in there too. You don't know who I, like, how, like, I'm doing this professionally and you're telling me that I'm wrong, and you have a better guess from watching a 5-minute video about what my type is.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you are an INFP and I'm an ESFJ.
Yeah, but more than I do, like, immersed in this. So it was a little offensive. And it would be easy to almost see us, as we talk about the difference between typing and profiling, dichotomously. Like, oh, that's typing. That's beneath me. Profiling's superior. And I don't see it that way. I think it's a journey. It's a process we're on. I think that's where we start. And I don't get offended by that at all right now. I go, well, that's where the person's at. They're in that typing experience of understanding personality.
Yeah. So
the longer I do this, the longer we do this, and the more mature I get, and I get past my own ego around it, because that's really where a lot of that is. It's like, who do you think you are projecting a type onto me? I realize my ego gets wrapped up into that. And I'm also very careful not to try to bestow type on other people, because I know that ultimately it's about me. And as we start to think in terms of typing versus profiling, it's really a journey we're on going forward. I think profiling, really creating an experience in another person, is where I hope everyone that's into typing ultimately wants to go toward. I think that's a more, like, not superior. I don't want to use the word that way. It's just more, it's like a different, it's more attuned. That's what it is. It's more active and attuned. And in fact, that's really one of the distinctions, I think, between typing and profiling. Personality typing is a very passive, lean back activity typically. You're watching a video on Netflix, you're observing someone from a distance, you're, seeing someone being interviewed, and you and maybe somebody you're with, a roommate, a spouse, a friend, somebody you're talking with might help talk through it. Like, what do you think their type is? And,
yeah, if you're lucky enough to have somebody be into type with you.
Yeah. But it's kind of a passive, like you can't actually engage with that person, that character on TV or whatever, or that celebrity or that interviewee. You're watching it and you're guessing something. You're positing an idea of the type they might be. And there's value in that. There's a lot of learning to come from it, but it's definitely a passive experience. Whereas profiling is much more proactive. You're co-creating an experience with someone that the actual subject you're coming to determine the type with is with you there. So you get that immediate feedback from there. There's that feedback loop created. And it's an experience that you create with this person. It's a magical experience, I think.
Yeah, well, if you're doing it right, you've created a container where somebody else feels safe, that you're having a dialogue, like an experience, like a full, rich experience with another person. You are calibrated throughout that experience because you might be on the wrong track, and explain what you think you're seeing, and the other person can give you feedback that, nope, that's not resonating with me. And so it requires you to broaden your horizons a little bit and broaden how you maybe see certain things show up. And it also gives them something to go away with, something powerful, something that has been workshopped. If you workshop how you do all of these things, then you can get tighter and tighter in your delivery, more pithy, more targeted, and you get better at doing those callbacks, which go back to the interview and point out specific examples in their life that they've shared with you where their type is showing up. And so it helps them become reflective. Like they can then sort of go, oh yeah, you're right. I totally am doing that in that moment. And that might be very validating for them. Like, this is something that is very much in alignment with my cognition. And so this is something I should be doing. Or it could be a moment of reflection, of introspection that they need. Where
Challenge.
It's like, yeah, like this might be something that I really shouldn't be doing. Or maybe this is something that I need to be reevaluating whether or not it's healthy. And if you can give them these little nuggets, these little pieces of information that can be really powerful, the person can go away changed and feeling very understood, which I think is the magic of that experience. If you do it well from beginning to end, you've created a safe environment where another person feels profoundly and deeply understood. And I think that changes the profiler. Like, having to build these sort of different skills, having to learn rapport building, having to learn the art of a good, solid interview, having to learn to be open to real world feedback, that what you're positing might not be resonating with another person, and being open to receiving that feedback and going, okay, so how can I calibrate this? And then having the experience of handing somebody information that makes them feel validated, understood, and maybe deeply introspective for the first time ever. That entire experience, being able to be the person who's the steward of that experience, really changes the person providing it.
We will be right back. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker. Now back to the show. I think that's a really good point, is profiling's more involved. It's a little slower and it's experiential. It's a experience you're creating with someone where when you're starting out typing, it's a lot faster. You can move faster because there's less at stake. You can do it casually, at home or on your headphones, watching something on your phone, like whatever, or with another person. And it's fun. It can be random. It doesn't have to, there's not like a lot of discipline around typing typically. I mean, some people have taken the art of typing and have really, I mean, I see YouTube channels and people teaching typing, how to do that. And they're really trying to dial that in. But it's not as, like, I think the profiling process is more slow and experiential overall.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the advantages to typing is that it has that speed. It has that like sort of low barrier of entry where you can simply observe and look for clues that the person is giving. Everybody gives clues as to their type. And so there is a lot to be said for typing as a skill in and of itself, for sure.
You can do it anywhere at any time, by yourself or with another person. Whereas with personality profiling, there is a setup cost. You have to engage another person to enter that space with you. So again, that setup cost is there. Again, it ends up with, it's just a different type of methodology. It's a different way of going about it. So I think that's a little bit of a distinction there as well. One of the challenges though on the typing side, when you're getting started with typing and you're just kind of getting into this and you're typing people on TV and all that stuff, there's a danger or a risk of just falling into seeing people as stereotypes. Like you get a sense or an impression of maybe a type that shows up, a certain personality type, and then you start to almost fit people to stereotypes rather than really the cognition that's in their mindset. So I think that when you get into the profiling experience of it, creating that experience with another person, you're fundamentally understanding how their cognition's working, how they're learning information, how they're making decisions, and you're able to give them insight into that for themselves too.
Yeah, it really expands one's territory. Like if you've never seen, maybe you have just maybe one or two examples of a personality type in your life. And so those have become your sort of like the archetype in your mind. Like that's the person. When you think of, I don't know, like an ESTP, you think of this person. I mean, I've done that before. ESTPs were basically my dad forever until I met other ESTPs and I was like, oh, there's a wide variety of ESTPs out there. They're not all like my father. And that happens all the time. I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges of doing anything like this, whether typing or profiling, is that we come in with all of our biases. We come in with the wiring in our own mind about what all of this looks like and how it's supposed to show up. And so when you're in a profiling session and you're seeing evidence of certain cognition, but the person themselves isn't fitting a stereotype or doesn't look like that specific person, and you really get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm studying this, I'm looking at this, I'm ruminating on it. Maybe I'm checking with another person who's doing profiling and the two of us are talking about it, maybe in post, and we're really kind of honing in on that. And then all of a sudden I discover, no, sure enough, this person is this personality type. That's the cognition they're using. And now my frame of reference for that type has expanded. Now I understand that this type comes in different flavors, and I shouldn't be projecting stereotypes on them. I should understand them as their cognitive function stack or wiring, not as like some sort of model for, I mean, not all ENTPs are Doc Brown. They just aren't. And so it's like, it's nice to be able to know that and then be able to see other people who are ENTPs and engage with them and understand them without them having to follow that script.
As you go through your typing to profiling journey, the focus changes. So when you're personality typing, again, passively seeing characters on TV or watching something that maybe you're observing and then you're determining a type, the focus is really on you as the person trying to determine the type. It can become, at its worst place, very egocentric, right? It's about me getting the type right. And when you move into the journey of profiling, it's really about them, the person you're sitting down to have that conversation with. That experience of profiling, it's about focusing on them and giving a gift to them. I mean, how many times has someone sat down and just listened to you for an hour in your life? That is powerful. Just sitting down and asking them questions about themselves is such a powerful experience for another person to be listened to and be interested in. The gift you're giving to somebody about them is so powerful in that alone. Now you add in the ability to help them discover their best fit type in that process. This is powerful stuff we're talking about. So really the focus is, as you kind of evolve in your journey from just typing, which is all about you, and you getting the type right and bestowing your right answer upon the world or upon this person or telling your friends or whatever. It's really about them creating at the profiling level, creating an experience on their behalf. The focus changes. Neither one is necessarily wrong, but it definitely moves you from that focus on yourself to the focus on the other through the process and the journey you go on.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to remember. And by the way, I think typing is a blast and it's super fun and I do it all the time. I will say being a profiler has actually made me a quote unquote worst typer. Like I'm not as good at typing. And in part, it's because I've seen too many variations of each type in profiling so that it makes me reserve judgment. And so I'll be in like a group of students and somebody, will maybe be watching a TV show or a movie or something. And all of them will have much faster guesses than I do. I want way more information before I make my type guess. And oftentimes I'm like, I don't know if I would know unless I could ask this question and this question, because it would be the answers to those questions that would help me determine. And so I think typing is a lot of fun, but doing profiling has actually made me a far more cautious and careful typer. That said, it's because I think typing is focused on result, whereas profiling is focused on process. And so if you're doing typing, because it's usually passive, it's usually observational, and sometimes it's conversational. Sometimes you're, entering a dialogue with a person, but it's so much more about the result and racing to the result. Whereas profiling is about the process of what we just talked about. It's got 4 different key components that all require skills to be built in and of themselves. And so even if you get the type, quote unquote, the type wrong, especially in early days when you're just practicing it, that's okay, because you're really trying to hone in on that process. Once the process is honed in on and you do a very good job and you become really seasoned at it, your results are far more consistently accurate. But it's not really about that result. It's about the process that leads to the result.
When you're starting out your journey with just typing, you are limited by observation. And as you move in your journey into personality profiling, you are empowered through conversation, because that feedback loop is inherent in the process itself. And you can watch for things like when you ask someone a question or you posit something and they're confused by that, you're able to either clarify or take their confusion into account for your profiling experience, helping them find their best fit type. So there's a bunch of things outside of the conversation, like confusion or like misunderstandings that you can pay attention to in the profiling process that can give you so much insight into how the person's mind is wired, how their mind is working. And you get that instant feedback from them on things that are landing or confusing and all of that. And that double-sided experience is so powerful.
I think if you do a solid profiling session, I think that the whole experience is powerful. I think that's the point of it. And I would say that the reason why, harkening back to the beginning of this podcast, when we were talking about coming back from profiler training, feeling really nourished. We always feel so nourished when we get back. And I think what really leads to that nourishment is that everybody there, first of all, they're all into type, so we all get to talk about type, and it's a blast for many days. And we all get to talk about growth and development, and that's awesome. But we also are building a skill that's making us better humans. Like the skill itself is teaching us to be better at creating rapport. It's teaching us to be better listeners. It's teaching us to be fascinated by other people in a way that they can experience our fascination in a reassuring way, not in like a creepy way, like why you're looking at me, but like in like somebody finds me fascinating because I have intrinsic worth. I'm intrinsically interesting. It teaches people to be humble enough to be calibrated and to not get their egos all wrapped up in being right about anything, but actually really understanding that it is an experience for the other person. And then to be able to give the gift of validation and understanding to another human and have them going away with it. Like being with a bunch of people who care enough to put quality into developing all of those skills, I think that's part of the magic. It's part of why I go back feeling nourished and refreshed, because all of those things it means that we're in the energy space of really caring humans who want good things for others. And so I think that's probably one of the most powerful things that has come out of creating this methodology, is that this was just a methodology that we developed to be able to help people figure out their type and go away and have a better experience. But when we started teaching it, I think I even am sort of surprised by how powerful it can be to be around a bunch of people who just want that. They want that experience of bridging chasms and giving the gift of understanding and really getting into other people's minds for the purpose of, of giving gifts, of doing positive and good things for the world.
I think that is so important to remember, that when you help someone else discover something about themselves, you are also discovering something about yourself in that process. Every single time you have those conversations with someone, you engage active listening. I mean, outside of even profiling, if you just really sit down and you engage with another human being, you are learning something about who you are, how you show up, and your place in the world. And so I think it's powerful, and I think the great part about this is there is a methodology behind it that you can use in your own life. Like we articulated earlier in this podcast, we gave you the basic framework for a profiling session. Now there's a lot of stuff that we talk about that can help augment that, and there's techniques and tools and little tips and the ways that we construct things and the practice and the calibration from other students, and there's so much that can go into it. But the basic structure is there, and it's freely given to you to use in your life if you want to create that rapport, create the interview conversation to help someone discover their type, verify it with them, and then explain it in a way that really lands and gives them a souvenir to take home. We would love for you to engage with that and use that in your life to go and have conversations with people, help them understand more about how they're wired. As our systems and old narratives break down around us, we can see this clearly in the world. We're losing the old guard. We're losing the old institutions and old religions and old things that kept society kind of on track and on the same page. And we're losing all of that, or much of it. Like not all of it's going to go away. It might morph and change over time, but some of those things are changing rapidly, and people they're unsure of themselves. They're like, who am I in this world? What is my identity? Who do I see myself as, and how do I navigate this space? And the gift of understanding how they are wired, how they're showing up, their preferences for learning, their preferences for making decisions, understanding those are unique to them as individuals, and maybe other people aren't wired like them. This is powerful stuff that really helps people navigate this new world that we are, I use the word assaulted by. It's a very assaulting feeling, I think, for many of us as the world changes underneath our feet so fast. This can give a sense of stability, I think, personal sovereignty and stability for us as people.
Yeah, it's a very introverted feeling way of looking at it too, which is who am I in all of this? Because my mind immediately goes to an extroverted feeling place of how do we bridge these chasms?
Sure, of course.
I'm always like, how do we understand other people enough to have better relationships?
Of course.
But of course, that's the beauty. It's
proving the point, right?
Right, exactly. It's like it helps both in understanding who we are and having sort of a ballast for not that our type is our identity, and I don't think one should see it that way.
I agree.
But understanding our cognition is a node in the system of how we show up and how we operate, and it helps prescribe or diagnose, rather, why we're interested in what we're interested in, why we're making the decisions that we're making, and then it helps prescribe doing that better, making better decisions, understanding whether or not we are do we have permission to pursue the things we're naturally fascinated by? Yeah, we do have permission if we give it to ourselves. And sometimes we just need to have a little bit of understanding in order to give ourselves that permission. Then once we give it to ourselves, now we can give it to other people. Now we can be fascinated by others. And we can develop skills and strategies to build those bridges and help other people feel really held by us, like really held. So I think the reason why we want to go through this podcast is because this is a little bit, we're sort of peeling back the layers of and revealing that this is a bit of our mission in our own minds. Like this is part of why we do what we do, is to ensure that people have a mechanism for understanding themselves and others. And profiling versus typing, I think one of the things we're trying to do also is we're trying to encourage people to use these tools to, like as hammers to build, not as weapons to break down, as ways to encourage each other to focus on processes and getting better at understanding others, as opposed to needing to be right and, going after each other, maybe even in communities. And typing is fun. You can get super good at it. You can get to a place where, I don't know, maybe you're the best in the world. Like you're exceptionally good at typing. And that is an impressive skill in and of itself. Like being able to help determine somebody's type from a distance or from observation is a beautiful thing. And we want to encourage people to maybe also enter the space of profiling. Profiling being what we just talked about, which is a co-created experience because of the changes it makes in an individual and because of the profound change it can make in another person's life. So we're also kind of talking a little bit at mission statement here as well.
Yeah. So what do you think? You've been here with us in this conversation. The third person, you don't have a microphone, but now it's time to hear from you. Come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this podcast, you can leave a comment, ask a question, or more importantly, share your story. Where are you at in the journey of typing, personality profiling? What are some of your experiences? What have you taken away? What are some of the mistakes you've made? Share what's going on for you. I think we can all learn from that, and we want to hear from you.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, that helps us out a lot. We have a book. It's called Personality Hacker. You can get it at all major book retailers. And if you leave us a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. And of course, our podcast is subsidized and made possible by our programs. So if you would like to seek out a personal growth program that is developed through the lens of personality types, head to personalityhacker.com, check out our product suite and catalog, and see if there is a program tailor-made for you.
My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.